Good evening, everyone, and welcome. My name is Leanne DeRouche, and I am the Executive Director of DV-LEAP, the Domestic Violence, Legal Empowerment, and Appeals Project. It is my pleasure to welcome you to our second Women's History Month event featuring cutting-edge lawyer and author, Carrie Goldberg. Carrie, thank you so much for joining us this evening. It's a pleasure to have you back, and welcome to all of you. Thank you for attending this event. For those of you who may not be familiar with DV-LEAP, we are a national organization. We provide pro bono or free legal appeals to domestic violence survivors across the country. We provide this service by partnering with pro bono lawyers to make sure that survivors are given access to justice and the protection and safety that they and their children deserve. If you're interested, if you're a lawyer attending tonight and you're interested in getting involved with some of our cases, we're going to be providing all sorts of links in the chat this evening, and you'll be able to connect with us. This event is organized by DV-LEAP's Advocacy Council. The Advocacy Council is a group of young professionals who serve as ambassadors for the organization. You'll be hearing from Christa Nicols, one of our Advocacy Council members, later in the evening. We are also always looking for additional members to the Advocacy Council. If you'd like to get involved, again, I direct you to the chat. There will be a link. Please do use the chat this evening. It's a way for us to interact with each other. You can pose questions to Carrie. We also are including a link to her book. If you don't have a copy, you need to have a copy of Nobody's Victim. So please look to the chat for that as well. Tonight, we are also offering closed captioning. So that service, to activate it, you should be able to click on a button in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. I'd also like to say a special thanks to staff member Flora Patel. As I like to say, Flora is the magic behind each one of our events. She is incredible in pulling off and organizing each one of these. They're seamless, and you just need to know that Flora is the person behind the scenes who's making all of that happen. So thank you so much, Flora. People often ask me how they might be able to support DV-LEAP or support survivors of domestic violence. And actually, there are several actions that all of us can take. First and foremost, always believe survivors, because coming forward is hard enough and it takes courage. Second, sign up for our newsletter, follow us on social media, promote our events. And again, all of that will be available in the chat. We hope that you will keep up with us that way. Third, you can make a donation. Tonight's event is free. We do have a suggested donation of $15 or more if you are so moved. This is how we support our work. We are a nonprofit 501c3, and all donations are very much appreciated. And finally, you can attend our events. Our next event will be held on Earth Day, April 22nd from 12:30 to 1:30. It will feature a panel of experts, including Indigenous women from Alaska, who will be speaking about the intersection or the link between domestic violence and climate change. We'll be sharing more information about this soon, and so stay tuned. So with that, what I would like to do next is introduce to you Natalie Pattillo. Natalie is one of our newer DV-LEAP board members, and we are just so thrilled to have her moderating this conversation with Carrie tonight. Let me just tell you a little bit briefly about Natalie. Natalie is a survivor, journalist, writer, and documentary filmmaker based in New York City. Currently, she's co-directing, writing, and producing the forthcoming documentary, And So I Stayed, about survivors of domestic violence who are unjustly incarcerated for their acts of self-defense. And in some recent really welcome and exciting news, the film, which has been in the making for several years and features 3 incarcerated survivors, just learned that one of the women is released. She was actually released last week after serving 8 years of a 14-year sentence. Justice has been served. And part of this is because of the documentary that Natalie and her team has created. It was used in this case and made a difference in terms of her being able to be released early and reunited with her family. So we're so thrilled for you, Natalie, for your team, and most importantly for Tanisha and for her family. It's just such wonderful, wonderful news. So thank you everyone again for attending. And Natalie, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Leanne, for such a warm welcome. I hope I am unmuted. It says I am, so I'm going to just go with it. But yeah, it's been an incredible couple of weeks over here for our team, and we're just so overjoyed that justice is served, and what a great time to come together for this incredible event highlighting Carrie Goldberg's amazing book, and for, you know, powerful survivors and passionate legal advocates to unite. Truly honored to be in conversation with you, Carrie, and grateful for all who have joined us today. As a reminder, we're going to continue trying to remind this, but just put any questions into the chat or use the chat feature, and we will do our best to, you know, answer those along the way, but probably get to the Q&A at the end is when we're gonna be able to really get to the meat of those questions. So I'd love to introduce Carrie now. Carrie Goldberg is founder of victims law firm C.A. Goldberg. The Brooklyn firm does groundbreaking work nationally fighting for targets of sexual violence online and off. Her landmark cases include Herrick v. Grinder, which introduced the novel legal approach of applying product liability law to dangerous tech products, and KM v. City of New York, which is the highest known recovery in a Title IX case in New York City. Carrie's well-known work for victims of non-consensual porn is featured in the documentary Netizens and profiled in The New Yorker, Elle, Cosmo, Wired, Glamour, and more. Carrie is the author of Nobody's Victim. Can I have a copy of? With a lot of earmarks and underlines and highlights. I love the title. Fighting Psychos, Stalkers, Pervs, and Trolls, which was a 2019 New York's editor choice. Carrie attended Vassar College and Brooklyn Law School. And we're here today to talk about this incredible book. And when I first picked it up, when it first came out a couple of years ago, 2019, if I remember correctly. Okay, great. I just wanted to start off with a very quick quote that as I was flipping through for this event, that's in the book that really moved me, and I think will sort of like, you know, launch us into conversation. But Carrie, you had written, "Neither the lawyers, the judges, nor the cops I turned to for assistance had ever made me feel protected. Instead, I'd been repeatedly told there was nothing that they could do." And that really struck me as someone who's also a survivor, that is such a common feeling for us to feel, but you turned that helpless feeling into power with all of the work that you're doing today. So yeah, would love to touch on what inspired the book and led you to, you know, your work to start off with.
Yeah, thank you so much, Natalie. It is such a privilege to be talking to you, and always a privilege to do anything involving DV Leap, which is just my like, I'm in love with DV Leap. And they've, Leanne and Flora and Christa, just thank you so much for putting this together, for inviting me, for bringing so many people here, and all the support that you've shown to my cases and my firm over the years. It's, DV Leap is on my short list of things that I'm grateful for every day. And I know I'm not alone. So, you know, the question of like what inspired the book is kind of related to what inspired me to start the law firm, which is related to like that very quote that you read, which is that there's nothing lonelier than feeling like you're the only person going through something. And especially when you've been the victim of a crime or sexual harm, and you want to get justice or you need help because of stalking or something, you're dealing not only with the trauma of what you've been through, but also the trauma of the fix and going through the legal system and finding people that can help you. And that can be just as lonely and alienating as anything else. And it was for me when I was trying to get help after a really scary relationship where my ex retaliated against me, which I talk about in the book. And I talked to a lot of, I talked to several good, talented lawyers, but for everybody that I spoke to, my case was really like an anomaly. They might have, like one person had done a criminal, had 50 years of experience doing criminal law, and I had been falsely accused and as one of the things, and I had to deal with this criminal case. But he had no experience dealing with the domestic violence and the stalking. And another person had experience dealing with family court stuff, but didn't know anything about the non-consensual pornography thing. And so, I wanted to start the firm and to write the book just to show people, just to kind of be plugging this hole and to start a firm where we're dealing repeatedly with a common type of harassment and harms, so that when people come to us, the facts might be different and the harassment always, it's always evolving, but we can start to predict patterns emerged about the types of offenders that we were seeing, almost to the point where there was kind of a playbook. And so I find a lot of, like, the world feels much more organized to me if I can categorize things. And so part of this book is just kind of categorizing the types of offenders that we see, and then building out the taxonomy of who they are, so that their behavior becomes more predictable, and then it's less scary. And in the book we use like every chapter is highlights one of our cases and kind of introduces the issues that way.
Right. That's what I loved about it so much, was that it was able to break down the nuances without glossing over so many dynamics that I think a lot of the time get glossed over. And it gave it, each chapter highlighted a particular case or a particular offender in a way that wasn't, they're all the same. They are, like you said, but there's also nuances that we need to understand in how we understand and see these cases without erasing some of what survivors and victims are going through.
Yeah. And the book is about, it's really more about the survivors than the offenders, really, but it does like kind of organize the offenders, but through the stories of the survivors.
Right. It's deeply survivor led, and you can tell that the North Star is the survivors. Which brings me to my next question, because I think that you are very well known for your bold ethos of, unapologetic, which I love and admire, with your slogans and like I Sue Rapists and the book title itself. I wondered though, like, does that ever affect you in the courtroom? Like, do you ever get backlash for being the lawyer who is like unapologetic about taking a stand against abusers in that way? Like, or are people, are like court officials, I don't know, do they not care? I'm just was very curious, because it's like, I mean, optics is everything.
It totally is.
So
I am unapologetic. I feel like I think everyone probably here tonight feels like we have nothing to apologize for. And, you know, I think part of like the kind of bold, lash outy kind of stuff. I mean, part of it's like, you know, branding decisions, and it feels honest to me. And I am in the privileged position to be my own boss. And so like, you know, I'm not going to get fired if I use the F word. And you know, I think it definitely does impact probably the people that come to us for representation. You know, we're not, you know, an office with wood paneled walls and, you know, the library full of dusty, you know, law books. And you know, so we don't get the clients that are seeking that. In court, I mean, if the court has even ever heard of us, like I find that one of the fun things is that we'll get a lot of like young court like clerks and attorneys that will come, just like we'll kind of be milling about when we're at hearings or something. And so that's always kind of fun and flattering. Like the judge may not really care, but sometimes the clerks will have read about something that I've done. And yeah, and there was a fun situation recently where we needed to get our client to manage the estate so that we could sue a big tech company. And there was kind of a standoff between the two parents of the deceased girl. And the court clerk was like, you know, like telling the judge, no, you have to like, you know, like give the administrator power to hire, you know, this law firm because they do these amazing cases against big tech. And she had printed out some of the articles, and that was really cool.
That's amazing. It's so like heartening to hear that unapologetic ethos, brand, stance, like has its benefits, and that it's okay for us to be very, you know, clear about what we take a stance against. I think a lot of the time I've seen lawyers, you know, just reporting or like, you know, that are sort of placating or like not like placating within the system. And it's just so heartening to see you be so bold and clear about what you're doing and why. And it's just, I think it must be healing for the survivors that you work with, to work with a law firm that is clearly very survivor oriented, but you know, started by a survivor yourself. So I wonder, you know, how, you know, your survivorship, if you're comfortable sharing, has helped you navigate a trauma-informed law firm in a way that, you know, the system isn't trauma-informed. And so having to hold those two things at once.
Well, you know, and I was also thinking that one of the other things that's kind of beneficial about being bold and outspoken, especially on social media, is that it also like gives us a sense of unpredictability. For our adversary might find us a little bit unpredictable and might be a little bit afraid that we're going to like tweet something horrible about their client, which we almost never do, but they'll sometimes come to the bargaining table, you know, if there's a settlement or just be a little more passive than they might normally be because they're afraid of offending us and will like lash out on social media or something. And that just, you know, like that helps, you know, like it helps because you never want to say we're going to destroy your client's life, but somebody, you know, I think you'd lose your law license. If you don't settle with us, we'll destroy. But, you know, if somebody like Googles you and they're like, oh my God, like there's all these articles about this case or that case, it's like, okay, they know that like they don't want their client to be in the headlines. And so it just speaks for itself. But in terms of like being client, a trauma-informed law firm, it really starts with the staff and making sure that the staff's needs are met, and that we all come like into this work with our own trauma, and we can only help if we know how to bracket our trauma, so and use it in productive ways to empathize and help our clients without being triggered. And so like we have a lot of just like, we have group therapy every week with a licensed social worker, where we just can, as a staff, just vent, and we can have venting sessions about our cases and talk it all through. And I find that really helpful and nourishing. So just as kind of a baseline to go and then help the clients. But also, I mean, because clients who are dealing with sexual assault, sexual privacy violations, stalking, because they're in such a vulnerable state when they come to us, we really have to be looking at what they actually can tolerate in terms of a legal response. So we've had a number of cases where that person could have the next big case against Facebook or Instagram that challenges Section 230, and we try to get it to the Supreme Court or something. But what would happen to them in the process of that litigation? Can they, are they going to actually be able to thrive under that pressure and that limelight? And so sometimes as always, we have to be looking to our clients for what is best for them, and just like be guiding them gently. And so that might be, just recommending that that we are just focusing on a family court order protection or a cease and desist or a pre-litigation settlement. But, we just talk it all through and give the client the advice and guide them toward the decision. I feel like if we give them the information and then just say, make a decision, like that's not the support that they need. And then we also like have some cool like things, like one of our clients has now become a therapist. And so we have like a network of good therapists and people that can support the mental health of the clients.
That's amazing. So you come at it in a very holistic way to ensure that the resources are not just met on a legal front, but not only for your staff, but for your clients as well. That, group therapy, here are some, if you're interested and want to, good therapists that we trust, which is huge, huge, huge. Like, oh my God, the horror stories I've heard with therapists who are not trauma informed, let alone lawyers, is a nightmare. So that's incredible. And I think many firms could probably take a lot of learnings from that. Honestly, in any industry. So.
Yeah, I mean, especially like undertakings that are as major as like litigation, where it's so combative. And even if you're the plaintiff in a litigation and it's like for a really righteous cause and stuff, it's still like a roller coaster of emotions. There's still like moments when you're dealing with a low ball like settlement offer that is just really offensive, or you get the opposition papers, or you get the discovery notice, where it's just like, no matter how like emotionally healthy you are, there are bad days in any litigation.
Right. And I can imagine, like, what do you do with the rage, right? Like, that's the big, like, I actually ordered my 8-year-old daughter for her Christmas, it was a punching bag, and just like, here, you are justified to have anger. Like, I do not want to teach a young girl that she's not allowed to be angry. Let's just channel it in a way that is, positive, or, conducive for you. So I'm a big firm believer of not shutting out the rage or tampering it down or telling women to stop being angry. But how do you deal with the rage? What are some things that, because there are just times where I'm just like, oh, like when I hear about a horrible thing that's happened to a survivor, or like, yeah, I mean, I'm sure every day, that's every day, and you're dealing with like opposing counsel. I mean, I can't imagine.
Yeah, there's so much rage. And there's so much like combat. And my punching bag, you can't see it because the room behind me is dark, but it is right there. And there is a picture of an opposing counsel taped onto it.
Yes, yes.
And as lawyers, particularly like in the like intimate partner violence realm, we're dealing not just with like the rage of what's happened to our client, but we're dealing with, being gaslighted by opposing counsel, or, our client coming to us and feeling really panicked about their abuser violating the order of protection, or a judge telling us that, the motion we're making is stupid, or somebody being mad that you're not going to take their case and not understanding that decision, or, right. There's always conflict. And I think one of the ways that it gets dealt with for me is that there's just always, you can never focus on one conflict for too long because there's always another one that's distracting you from it. But for me, like I deal with rage through exercise and hobbies, like craft hobbies. So I've gotten, like I did a lot of beading over the winter. We made beaded bracelets for a lot of our clients. And I've been doing stained glass, but I find that like crafts to me are just like, are just the most healing thing, because you're like doing something that doesn't require all your brain, but you can see that you're making progress on it.
Right, absolutely. I mean, as you can see, my children have taken out their rage on my wall with the anyway, and their creative energy. But that brings me to a question, really thinking about how those drawings got on the wall amid the pandemic. Sort of parenting and whatever, doing everything we can to survive amid all of this. It makes me think about how COVID has, possibly, I mean, I've read reports, so I don't even want to say possibly at this point, but during COVID, there's been an increase in tech facilitated abuse. And I would love to hear, your thoughts on that. I'll just briefly mention that, like, even with my daughter's remote schooling, I am not allowed to like even put provisions in place as a parent, like to keep her from going to websites that I would rather her not go on. So even minor things like that, like the DOE's not considering because of like, I don't know why they don't have the infrastructure for it. I don't know. So I imagine that you've seen all sorts of like mayhem amid the pandemic that was already existed, but maybe, like abusers have gotten more creative and have more time on their hands.
Yeah, definitely. And like, I even have some statistics about what's changed. We've seen like a 75% increase in underage victims of internet, like sexual violence. Young people are tethered to their computers, and it's very racially, socioeconomically, and I mean the difference is mind-boggling, and it's largely because a lot of like socioeconomically disadvantaged people are not able to be monitoring their kids' computer activity all the time. Some of the cases that we've seen with young as 11 years old, victims have just been horrific. We've seen, there's been a big increase in like just content removal cases. There's been a huge increase in, not necessarily in the cases we've taken, but the outreach to our firm by men who are being sextorted online by, you know, hot-looking women that seduce them on Instagram and then coerce them into masturbating and then threaten to share their images if they don't pay. And then there's just been like 50% increase in revenge porn and internet privacy cases. I mean, just the amount of just like tech facilitated abuse has really skyrocketed. And really, you know, in both like adults and teens.
Right. Wow, those are some staggering numbers. It's like when you read it and sort of compute it to yourself when you read a news article, you're like, okay, that sounds bad. And then you hear it out loud from someone like you again, and you're like, oh my God, that it's like, and you know, it also makes me think of like virtual court and like maybe some of the issues that are playing out with like, I don't know, something I thought about is like, doesn't, like if you appear in virtual court and your abuser is present, well, like, can't they have access into your home? I guess you could put a background on, but those are like some of the things that I started thinking about and like ways in which you're not really getting the consent that you deserve. Like you would never invite a judge into your home. Like that's not fair. But they hear the like background noise of like your dog barking and like make judgments about maybe, you know, whatever biases they might have about how your home operates amid a pandemic. So I'm just curious, like how you guys have handled that. It was just a huge curiosity with all this COVID stuff going on in virtual courts.
Yeah, I mean, I'm personally like a huge fan of virtual courts. I mean, they're not perfect for all the reasons you described. They're, you know, but you know, it was a lot worse for survivors to have to be in the same building as their abuser,
right?
As opposed to being on the same screen. And we sometimes have gotten permission to like turn off the video for our clients or make it so that they don't have to see their abuser or even hear their abuser when there's like a family court order of protection. But just like to no longer have to deal with the like, are you going to be right behind him in the security line or in the elevator, or you know, the dynamics of just like navigating the physical space are just gone. The other thing is that there was such a huge backlog in family court and the judges were like, the courts have pretty much closed here in New York, but the one thing that judges were still doing was family court orders of protection, even at the height of the pandemic. And so our clients would get temporary orders of protection, and then instead of it being good for a month and then there's a court date, we've had one that was good, that it now has been 15 months since she got her temporary order of protection and still hasn't had the hearing for the permanent one, but the temporary one has been as long as what we could have probably gotten her for the permanent one. And so there's been kind of that advantage. I mean, there's a huge disadvantage in a lot of the plaintiff cases, you know, because they're not moving along, and there's really been a diminished pressure on defendants to settle because there's not, for a long time, there wasn't, the courts weren't taking new filings. And so you couldn't really threaten to sue and have that mean anything. But also like we got some expanded statute of limitations and stuff. You know, today was like the first day, or this week was the first week that our New York Supreme Courts have been back in business.
Wow. Yeah, no, I'm so glad that you pointed out that there have been benefits for survivors, because I think that's been a long time coming in terms of being a survivor being able to appear remotely so that they're not in the same building. So thank you for raising that and bringing that to attention, because that has been, I'm sure, incredibly beneficial for many survivors to not have to look over their shoulder when they walk out of the courthouse to make sure once the court officers are gone that they're not being stalked or whatever else.
And I think Jill Zaccardi maybe just pointed this out. Hi, Jill. That it's also made it so that you know, people from out of state, like you know, a lot of times somebody's stalker is in a different state than they're in, and so we can now represent people, or people don't have to come, you know, fly into New York to appear on their case, but they can do it remotely.
Right. Absolutely. Great point. Thanks, Jill.
Yeah.
So, you know, I was wondering, you know, I want to also remind people that, you know, any questions, please put in the chat, because we're getting close to our Q&A portion. So, yeah, feel free to add on any questions that you have in there. But, you know, what words of advice or wisdom would you have for young lawyers or law students thinking about working in impact litigation or protecting vulnerable clients who are not protected by existing laws?
Okay, so my first advice for young new attorneys is, like, don't worry if you don't have your dream job. Okay, just like, don't worry about it, because like people tell you otherwise, but like your first job out of law school is not going to determine your whole path. And no matter what you do, it will help you in your next stage. And go into litigation, because that is, whether it's like in housing law, which is where I got my start representing low-income tenants, or doing intimate partner violence, or somewhere where you can get lots of court action. Because I find that as a litigator, there are so many creative ways to use a law degree. And if you just learn the basics of litigation, then you can really apply it to whatever kind of litigation you do, whether it's victims' rights or you know, family court, orders of protection, appellate work like DV Leap does. I'm trying to think what other advice I have. I mean, just don't be too hard on yourself. You know, I didn't go to a fancy law school or get good grades or get my dream job out of law school, but I totally, like, you know, couldn't be happier with my law degree. And there are just like tons of creative ways to use it.
All great words of wisdom. If I were a young law student right now, I would feel so hopeful with your words. But I am not, because I am no lawyer. You know, speaking about tech facilitated abuse, I wanted to sort of, let me figure out how I want to frame this, but, you know, like, it seems like there might be more of an awareness because of COVID about tech facilitated abuse, maybe amongst judges and lawyers, and seeing, because they're experiencing themselves some flaws in these systems, and safety and security concerns. So I'm wondering, like, you know, what is the status of the law? Is it changing? Are you excited about any new legislation or new law and seeing how it's being implemented?
Yes, I'm so excited. Well, so first of all, the last week the House passed the SHIELD Act, which is a federal criminal law against non-consensual pornography. In the last like 7 years, we went from having 3 states with criminal revenge porn laws to having 46. Wow. There's lots of interesting litigation surrounding it right now. I'm fighting off an anti-SLAPP defense in the Katie Hill case and trying to make a stand that in civil, in revenge, some of the revenge porn laws have a civil remedy. So I'm saying this remedy is about non-consensual sharing. And so they shouldn't be able to be dismissed under anti-SLAPP, which is about public, publication of newsworthy First Amendment protected speech. So that's something that I'm super interested in. Also, I'm obsessed with Section 230 and all the 4 or 5 different bills that are being proposed to change it so that tech companies have at least some responsibility for the harms that happen on their platforms. There's a lot. New York has, we're working right now on the Adult Survivors Act, which will change the statute of limitations for sexual abuse survivors who are adults and open up a window so that we can get civil remedies for old crimes that are past the statute of limitations. There's so much. This is just the beginning.
Yay! I love it. I love that there's so much to celebrate, because I think we need to acknowledge that in this very, very hard work. So I think we're going to start the Q&A pretty soon. Christa from the Advocacy Council is going to lead the way on that. And yeah, thank you so much, Carrie, and thank you so much for everyone for joining us. I will sit and watch as you answer these questions.
Thanks, Natalie. That was really fun.
Thanks, Natalie, and thank you, Carrie, and thank you to everybody in attendance. And we've got some really great questions coming in, so I'll do my best to paraphrase them to Carrie and hopefully get some great responses for you guys. So I think the first one really tracks with what you were just talking about regarding Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. And, absent any of this legislation actually getting passed by Congress, it's really hard to sue any of the tech companies in court. So we've got a question kind of related to, what other routes for justice have you been able to pursue for victims in spite of 230, or, any levels of success you were able to have in spite of it in the cases that you've litigated this far? Okay,
so I've got all these ideas about new litigations against tech, with the lovely amicus brief from DV Leap on our Herrick v. Grindr case, which was a case about our client being impersonated on the dating app Grindr, and over 1,000 strangers coming to his house for sex, and Grindr saying they didn't have the technology to exclude an abusive user. We then sued Grindr under a products liability theory, saying that if you've created a product that facilitates in-person sexual encounters and you didn't design into it an ability to ban malicious users when it's just a foreseeable certainty that sometimes it'll be used by stalkers and rapists and stuff, then you've released a defective product into the stream of commerce, blah, blah, blah. So we lost in the Second Circuit. But then the case has gotten a lot of attention because it's such an extravagant reading of Section 230, which was passed in 1996 to protect, the little bitty burgeoning tech industry from big, mean plaintiff lawyers who were suing them for defamation for posts that were on Prodigy and CompuServe. And so it's now, basically with the Herrick v. Grindr outcome, the courts are saying, no, you can't even sue them for their own product deficiencies. But that's just the Second Circuit. And I feel that this is a line of reasoning that we should be taking up elsewhere. And that if we're going to get to the Supreme Court and make changes to Section 230, I think it's going to be from a products liability standpoint. And so one of the things I'm doing is encouraging and taking cases like in other parts of the country that deal with companies that are that are not able to even meet their own terms of service because they don't have the ability or the scalability to moderate their content or ban malicious content. I could go on and on about Section 230, so I'll stop.
Yeah, and just a quick follow-up, because I'm also obsessed with the statute. So, you know, because it's been construed so broadly, it seems that, you know, we're going to be in a difficult spot with it as, you know, technology changes and types of abuse can kind of evolve with that. Do you think the court taking a case that would more narrowly define the statute would be preferable to Congress attempting to amend the statute?
Well, I think as a litigator, I have this like idyllic idea that just, you know, like the power of one attorney and one client can change the law of the land. And I prefer that to begging and pleading with elected officials who are, you know, taking all this money from lobbyists and, you know, begging for them to listen to you and pass legislation. I worked on a lot of legislation relating to Section 230 and relating to revenge porn. I just don't have a, I hate the legislative experience. And so I feel like it's more within my power to be doing like strong cases. And we had Clarence Thomas, of all people, in like a case, he was saying that he wants a Section 230 case to come before the court. And he cited Herrick v. Grinder as an example of courts interpreting it way too broadly. So I'm like, let's just bring more cases around and something's gonna, you know, rise to the top.
Yeah, that's a great point. All right, so do you think there is public awareness and understanding around how harmful technology-based abuse is for survivors, or do you think that there's still a lot of education that's needed?
I think there's tons of education that's needed. I think that we're making progress on better laws in terms of like non-consensual pornography, but we're still at a point where we can have great laws, but if there's nobody that's enforcing them, or there's nobody that's prosecuting them, then we may as well not have any laws at all. I mean, I had an 11-year-old client who I mentioned earlier, who was the victim of this just outlandishly like horrendous tech abuse, and being coerced into producing child sexual abuse material and stuff. And she went to the local precinct and with her mom explained what had happened, and they told her there was no remedy for her. I mean, there were probably 10 laws that were violated, and we ultimately have gotten it prosecuted with DOJ. But if we don't have like the officers at the precinct level understanding like what is and is not illegal, then we're kind of screwed. And I think that's where the education is really needed.
Yeah, I think your book did an excellent job highlighting that with the stories. So what's the state of assistance to clients with linguistic or cultural difference?
I think it's largely inadequate. I think, in court, there will be a translator that if you wait 2 hours for the person, they'll finally come, but that doesn't satisfy the need to be able to effectively communicate with your lawyer. And, I think clients who have, language barriers or disabilities or communication issues, like they're at a huge disadvantage and courts do not accommodate them. And I don't think the legal system does either.
That's a great point. And, somewhat relatedly is what piece of advice would you give victims who don't have a lawyer that's very knowledgeable about sexual abuse and trauma and, even particularly some of it that takes place online?
Well, I would say if you have a lawyer who's not knowledgeable about that stuff, consider finding a lawyer who is. If that's not an option, then you know, maybe my book would help, or you know, there are a lot of articles online that deal with harms. But it is important to have a lawyer, just as you would, you know, if you have a heart issue, you want a cardiologist. You want a lawyer who's knowledgeable, if possible, about what you're going through.
Yeah, great. And so one of the questions posed is, we plan to start a legal abuse support group next month. I found that your clients prefer to get more resources or just have others in similar situations listen. I love that you provide your clients with resources like therapists that get it.
I think having, is this a question, or is this DV Leap is planning?
This is a question that came in. I read it because I didn't want to mangle it by trying to put it in a third person format.
Oh, I'm super curious about the legal abuse support group. So is it people who are survivors of people who've like weaponized the court system? Like, is that what we're talking about legal abuse support group?
That's Flora. Is there a way to
we
ask
see that a lot,
Lisa Johnson
where people
clarify? Okay.
People are like mangling the court system, bringing frivolous litigation and people stuck in it. People stuck in the court system. I think that's
it's people stuck in it.
I think that's
clarification.
I think that's tremendous. I think that we have a little system of, we've got several clients that just assist other, like former clients who are on the other side of their experience, who we bring in to assist, particularly like in criminal cases. And I have a little set of clients that help other clients with their victim impact statements, and it's so healing for the clients for former clients to help current clients, and it's really this nice loop that makes me like so proud. But I think that you know, having, if the question's whether clients prefer to get more resources or just talk to others in similar situations, I think probably the camaraderie of just talking about what they're all experiencing is probably going to go the farthest. But absolutely, like if there are resources and articles and books to read, I might recommend mine. You know, that could also be like a good way to get conversation going if they all, you know, like creating a little book club or something.
Excellent. Yeah, so we'll just ask one last one, hopefully leave it on a high note. Are you hopeful that the law is changing to become more protective of victims, and what are the main remaining challenges or some exciting developments that you could share in that context?
Well, I'm, you know, I think that things have come a long way with, in some ways, like with criminalizing revenge porn. Such an example of just like, you know, the nation being swept in reform, and there's much less victim blaming on that. But I think that there's always still this idea that you know, women are lying, that they're retaliating, that we're crazy, and I think that is just a stereotype that we're gonna be stuck with for a while longer. But the best way to do it is just to be bringing the cases, in my opinion.
Yeah, great. Thanks so much for taking our questions. I think Natalie is going to hop back in to wrap up.
Yes, I am back in if Zoom is telling me the right thing. Yes, thank you so much, Carrie. And thank you everyone for your really, really intriguing questions. And of course, Carrie, for your wonderful, insightful, and perceptive responses. I think we're all incredibly grateful to have this opportunity to chat with you and learn from your lived experiences. So just wanna give another major shout out to Carrie to the Advocacy Council, and to everyone for attending.
Hello, everyone. I think we have a technical difficulty with Natalie's feed. So just wanted to echo her thanks to Carrie and to everyone for attending tonight. Fabulous questions. Really love the engagement. We thank you so much for taking an interest in DV Leap and joining us tonight. Please do get involved. We'd love to hear from you. Let's collaborate. And Carrie, thanks. Go buy the book. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Bye, everyone. Thank you. This is so much fun.
Thank you.
Thanks, Leanne.
Thanks, Carrie.
Thank you, Natalie.